You're feeling that pain in your chest right now. That feeling like life is testing you beyond your limits. Everyone around you seems to be living an easier life while you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. You look around and see people who've never been through a tenth of what you've been through, living like the world owes them something. And you're here, hurt, tired, questioning whether it's worth continuing to fight. But I'm going to tell you something that will change everything. That pain you're feeling isn't your punishment. It's your diploma. Napoleon Hill spent 17 years studying the richest and most powerful men in the world. And you know what he discovered? That they all had one thing in common. They transformed their greatest pain into their greatest strength. They understood something that the masses will never understand. Pain doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to forge you. While most people run from pain, you're here trying to understand what it means. That already puts you in a completely different category. There's an enormous difference between those who react to pain and those who use it. Those who react get trapped in the cycle of eternal victimization. Those who use it become unstoppable. Have you noticed how the people around you react when you start to evolve? They get uncomfortable. It's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because your evolution exposes their mediocrity. When you decide to stop complaining and start building, when you stop seeking approval and start building your own approval, something happens in your environment. People start feeling uncomfortable, and that's exactly what should happen. You're not here to be comfortable for others. You're here to become who you really can be. The pain you feel when people criticize you, when they isolate you, when they judge you, isn't evidence that you're on the wrong path. It's evidence that you're on the right path. Most people spend their whole lives avoiding any kind of discomfort. They choose relationships that don't challenge them, jobs that don't make them grow, routines that keep everything predictable and safe. And then they wonder why they feel empty, why they feel like they're just existing instead of living. But you're not like most people. If you were, you wouldn't be here looking for answers. You know there's something more. You feel like you were made for something greater. And that feeling hurts because you haven't gotten there yet. That pain you feel is the distance between who you are now and who you know you can become. Napoleon Hill called this the definite major purpose. The difference between people who achieve the extraordinary and people who live ordinary lives isn't talent, it's not luck, it's not connections. It's the willingness to endure the pain of transformation. It's the ability to look suffering in the eyes and say, "You won't stop me. You'll make me stronger." And if this video is making you reflect so far, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel because the next videos will transform you even more. You're part of an invisible minority that understands that evolution is expensive, and whoever is here has already decided to pay that price. I'm going to tell you something that most people will never understand. The pain you avoid today will be collected with interest in the future. Every time you choose the easier path, every time you avoid the difficult conversation, every time you postpone the decision you know you need to make, you're accumulating an emotional debt that will have to be paid sooner or later. The difference is that when you pay this debt voluntarily, you maintain control. When life forces you to pay, you have no choice about how, when, or where it's going to happen. That's why people who avoid pain always end up suffering more. They postpone the inevitable until they can no longer run away. But you made it this far in the video, which means you're not the type who runs. You're the type who faces things. And that already puts you in a completely different category from the masses. Most people stop at the first signs of resistance. They hear a truth that makes them uncomfortable and run to something easier to digest, not you. You continue because you know that on the other side of pain, there's something worthwhile. Now I'm going to reveal something that could change your perspective forever. You're not being attacked for what you do wrong. You're being attacked for what you represent. When people criticize your choices, when they question your determination, when they try to convince you that you're overreacting, they're not worried about you. They're worried about what your evolution says about their stagnation. There's an invisible enemy that works against anyone who decides to rise above average. This enemy uses the people around you as spokespersons. He whispers in their ears things like, "He's getting arrogant, she's changed, he thinks he's better than us." And these people, without realizing it, become soldiers in a war they don't even know they're fighting. The truth is that your evolution exposes others' comfort zones. When you decide to wake up earlier, work later, study while they watch television, read while they scroll through social media, you're showing them that it's possible to live differently. And this deeply disturbs them because it removes the excuses they use to justify their own limitations. That's why when you decide to change your life, you automatically lose some people. Not because you got worse, but because you got different. And mediocre people feel threatened by excellence. They prefer to see you at their level because it justifies their own choices. But there's a crucial difference between people who win and people who stay average. Those who win understand that loneliness is part of the process. While the mediocre need constant approval, the exceptional learn to approve of themselves. While the mediocre make noise about every small victory, the exceptional work in silence and let the results speak. Napoleon Hill discovered that all the great leaders he studied went through periods of intense loneliness. Periods where they had to choose between acceptance from others and loyalty to their goals. And they all made the same choice. They chose their goals. This doesn't mean they didn't feel pain. It means they understood that feeling pain and being destroyed by pain are two completely different things. Pain can be your teacher or your executioner. The difference lies in your perspective. When you understand that every criticism is confirmation that you're on the right track, you stop taking things personally. When you understand that every person who abandons you is just making room for better people to enter your life, you stop trying to convince people who don't deserve your energy. You've reached a point where things start to transform. Don't give up now. What I'm going to show you next will make everything make sense. There's a fundamental difference between people who give up at the first sign of resistance and people who use resistance as fuel. Let me give you a practical example. When you decide to improve your physical fitness, the first days at the gym are the hardest. Your muscles ache, you feel clumsy, you want to quit. Most people use this pain as evidence that it's not for them, but a minority understands that this pain is evidence that it's working. The muscle soreness you feel after a workout isn't your body punishing you. It's your body adapting. It's your body rebuilding itself stronger. It's the same thing with the emotional pain you feel when you decide to evolve as a person. It's not punishment. It's adaptation. But there's a difference between pain that builds and pain that destroys. Pain that builds is the one you consciously choose because you know it will take you where you want to be. Pain that destroys is the one you allow others to impose on you without any purpose of growth. When you choose to wake up an hour earlier to study, you're choosing constructive pain. When you choose to stay home reading instead of going out to get drunk, you're choosing constructive pain. When you choose to have difficult conversations instead of avoiding them, you're choosing constructive pain. But when you accept being disrespected because you're afraid of being alone, when you accept a job you hate because you're afraid to try something new, when you stay in toxic relationships because you're afraid to start over, you're choosing destructive pain. The difference is that constructive pain has a clear purpose and an expiration date. It hurts now, so you don't have to suffer later. Destructive pain has no purpose and no end. It just consumes your energy without giving anything in return. And here's something few understand. The strongest people in the world aren't those who never feel pain. They're those who learn to transform pain into power. They don't avoid suffering. They use it as raw material to build something better. Napoleon Hill noticed that all the men he studied had one thing in common. They had transformed some great defeat into their greatest victory. Henry Ford went bankrupt 5 times before creating the Ford Empire. Thomas Edison failed more than 1,000 times before inventing the incandescent light bulb. Andrew Carnegie started as a poor boy working in a factory, What separated these people from all the others who also went through difficulties? The ability to reinterpret the meaning of pain. While most see failure as evidence of incapability, the great ones see failure as valuable information. While most see rejection as humiliation, the great ones see rejection as redirection. You're not being tested to see if you're strong enough. You're being forged to become stronger than you ever imagined possible. Every person who disappoints you is teaching you to trust yourself more. Every plan that goes wrong is forcing you to develop your ability to adapt. Every criticism you receive is teaching you to validate yourself instead of seeking external validation. And if you felt something different so far, stay, because now I'm going to reveal the secret that separates the 1% from the other 99%. Most people live reacting to circumstances. They wake up and let the world dictate their mood, their energy, their decisions. If something good happens, they're happy. If something bad happens, they're sad. They're like boats without anchor, always at the mercy of the waves. But there's a small minority that learn to live proactively. They don't react to circumstances. They create circumstances. They don't wait for the world to change to feel better. They change themselves and consequently change their world. And the pain you feel now is the entry price to that select group. It's the investment you need to make to stop being a person things happen to and become a person who makes things happen. But this investment needs to be conscious. You need to choose to pay this price knowing exactly what you're buying. When you understand that every moment of discomfort you consciously accept makes you more prepared for anything life might present you, you stop avoiding difficulties and start looking for them. Not because you like to suffer, but because you understand that on the other side of conscious suffering exists a version of you that's capable of things the current version can't even imagine. Most people spend their whole lives trying to avoid any kind of emotional discomfort. They build their entire lives around the premise that feeling good is the main objective. But when you do this, you also eliminate any possibility of real growth. Because growth always involves leaving the comfort zone. Always involves doing things you've never done before. And doing things you've never done before always generates discomfort. That's why people who avoid discomfort end up trapped in small lives. They might even feel safe, but safety without growth is just a comfortable prison. And eventually even this comfortable prison becomes uncomfortable because human beings weren't made to stagnate. They were made to evolve. Have you noticed how some people seem to have a different energy, how they enter an environment and everyone notices? It's not because they're more beautiful or more intelligent. It's because they carry with them the confidence that only comes from someone who has faced their fears and emerged victorious on the other side. This confidence can't be faked, can't be bought, can only be earned. And the price of this achievement is exactly the pain you're avoiding. Every time you choose to do the difficult thing instead of the easy thing, you deposit a little of that confidence in your emotional account. And over time, these small deposits become a fortune of genuine self-esteem. But most people prefer to try to fake this confidence instead of building it. They buy expensive clothes, expensive cars, expensive houses, trying to create an external image that compensates for internal fragility. But this never works, because true confidence comes from inside out, not from outside in. Napoleon Hill discovered that all truly successful people had developed what he called applied faith. Not necessarily religious faith, but faith in their own ability to overcome any obstacle. And this faith didn't fall from heaven. It was built brick by brick through small victories achieved in moments of great difficulty. Every time you feel fear and act anyway, you build a brick of that faith. Every time you feel like giving up but continue anyway, you build a brick of that faith. Every time you choose to be honest when it would be easier to lie, you build a brick of that faith. And we've reached a point where everything starts to make sense. The pain you feel when you decide to evolve isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. It's life's way of ensuring that only people who are truly committed have access to the highest levels of achievement. If it were easy, everyone would do it. If it didn't hurt, it wouldn't be transformation. If it didn't cost dearly, it wouldn't be valuable. The pain you feel is the guarantee that you're paying the real price for the person you want to become. But there's a crucial difference between suffering with purpose and suffering for the sake of suffering. Suffering with purpose is when you consciously accept short-term pain to obtain long-term benefits. Suffering for the sake of suffering is when you maintain yourself in situations that hurt you without any benefit in return. The first is an investment. The second is waste. The first strengthens you. The second weakens you. The first has an expiration date. The second is infinite. That's why it's so important to know the difference between pain that's worth it and pain that isn't. The pain that's worth it is what you feel when you're building something, when you're learning something new, when you're distancing yourself from toxic people, when you're saying no to things that no longer serve you, when you're investing time and energy in yourself instead of wasting it on distractions. The pain that's not worth it is what you feel when you're destroying yourself, when you're repeating the same mistakes, when you're maintaining yourself in abusive relationships, when you're wasting your gifts, when you're living the life others want for you instead of the life you want for yourself. And you who made it this far have already proven something important. You're not the type who avoids difficult truths. You're not the type who just looks for confirmation of what you already believe. You're here because you want to grow, even if growing hurts. And that already puts you in a completely different category from the masses. Most people want change without transformation. They want different results doing the same things. They want to feel better without doing anything different. But you already understood that this is impossible. You already understood that if you want something you've never had, you need to do something you've never done. And doing something you've never done always generates anxiety, always generates doubt, always generates resistance, both internal and external. But this resistance isn't evidence that you're going in the wrong direction. It's evidence that you're going in the right direction. When a plane takes off, it faces air resistance. But this resistance isn't to prevent flight, it's to make flight possible. Without resistance, there's no lift. Without lift, there's no flight. It's the same thing with your personal evolution. The resistance you feel isn't trying to stop you, it's trying to strengthen you. That's why people who never face resistance never fly high. They stay trapped at ground level, where the air is dense and vision is limited. But when you accept facing resistance, when you use pressure as fuel instead of excuse, you gain access to altitudes that most people don't even dream of reaching. And when you're at those altitudes, things that seemed enormous down there seem small. Problems that seemed impossible to solve become simple. People who seemed so important lose relevance. You gain a completely different perspective on life. But to reach this point, you need to be willing to endure the pressure of takeoff. You need to be willing to leave behind everything that's familiar and comfortable. You need to be willing to fly alone until you find others who also chose to fly high. Napoleon Hill realized that all truly successful people went through a period he called transmutation, a period where everything they were transformed into something completely different. Like a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly, they had to die to an old version of themselves to be born to a new version. And this process of transmutation is always painful. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly without discomfort. It needs to completely dissolve inside the cocoon before emerging transformed. If you tried to help it by cutting the cocoon, you would kill it. The struggle to get out is an essential part of the strengthening process. It's exactly what happens to you when you decide to evolve. You enter a process of dissolution of who you were to be able to emerge as who you can become. And the people around you will try to convince you that you're complicating things unnecessarily, that you were fine before, that you changed for the worse. But you didn't change for the worse. You're simply no longer compatible with their mediocrity. You can no longer pretend that shallow conversations are interesting. You can no longer waste time on activities that add nothing to your life. You can no longer accept less than you deserve just to avoid conflict. And this bothers people who still live at that level because your evolution exposes their limitations. Your discipline exposes their laziness. Your determination exposes their weakness. Your growth exposes their stagnation. That's why they'll try to convince you that you're overreacting. But you're closer than you imagine. Every day you choose discipline instead of convenience, you're closer. Every time you choose to invest in yourself instead of wasting resources, you're closer. Every time you choose truth instead of comfortable illusion, you're closer. Closer to what? Closer to becoming the person you always knew you could be. Closer to living the life you always knew you could live. Closer to achieving the goals you always knew you could achieve. The only thing separating you from this was your willingness to pay the price. And you're already paying. Every moment of loneliness you accept to work on your goals is part of the payment. Every criticism you receive that doesn't shake you is part of the payment. Every temptation you resist is part of the payment. Every time you choose to do the right thing when no one is watching is part of the payment. And here's what most people don't understand. You're not paying this price to become a different person. You're paying this price to become who you really are. Underneath all the layers of social conditioning, of fears imposed by others, of limitations you accepted as truths, exists the real person you always were. This person isn't afraid to be alone because she knows she's excellent company for herself. This person doesn't need external approval because she developed solid internal approval. This person doesn't let herself be shaken by criticism because she knows exactly who she is and where she's going. This person always existed within you. She was just buried under years of compromises with mediocrity, under years trying to please people who didn't deserve to be pleased, under years avoiding conflicts that needed to be faced, but now you're excavating. Every pain you consciously accept is a shovel of dirt removed. Every discomfort you face instead of avoiding is another layer of conditioning removed. You're freeing yourself from everything that isn't really you to finally be yourself. And when you emerge completely, when you finally become who you really are, something interesting happens. You stop attracting people who aren't compatible with your energy. You stop getting involved in situations that drain your strength. You stop accepting less than you deserve because you know exactly what you're worth. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. It's not superiority, it's authenticity. It's not that you became better than others, it's that you became true to yourself. And when you're true to yourself, you naturally attract people who are also true to themselves. You create a circle of authenticity that strengthens mutually. But until you reach this point, you'll go through intense periods of loneliness. Periods where it seems like you lost everyone and didn't gain anyone yet. These are the most difficult periods, but also the most important. It's in these periods that you learn to be self-sufficient. It's in these periods that you develop the inner strength that will sustain you for the rest of your life. Most people can't handle these periods. They run back to toxic relationships, to mediocre environments, to empty conversations, because they prefer bad company to no company. But you're not most people. You understand that temporary loneliness is better than permanent low-quality company. And this choice, this willingness to be alone until you find people who really deserve your energy, is what separates the strong from the weak. The weak settle for anything just to not be alone. The strong prefer to be alone until they find quality. Napoleon Hill discovered that all great leaders went through these periods of apparent isolation. Periods where they had to choose between popularity and principles, between acceptance and evolution, between comfort and growth. And they all made the same choice. They chose to grow, even if it meant growing alone for a while, because they understood something fundamental. You can't evolve in the same environment that kept you stagnant. You can't become a new person, keeping the same people, the same habits, the same routines as always. Something needs to change. And most of the time, you're the only variable you have complete control over. That's why the pain of transformation is inevitable. Because transformation always involves leaving something behind. Always involves leaving somewhere known to go, somewhere unknown. And the unknown always generates fear, always generates anxiety, always generates resistance. But on the other side of this fear, this anxiety, this resistance, exists a version of you that's capable of things the current version can't even imagine. A version that doesn't get shaken by criticism because she knows who she is. A version that doesn't need external validation because she developed solid internal validation. A version that isn't afraid to be alone because she became excellent company for herself. This version already exists within you. She's just waiting for you to have enough courage to let her emerge. And the courage you need isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to act despite fear. It's the ability to feel pain and continue anyway. It's the strength to choose growth even when growth hurts. You're no longer the same person who started watching this video. Something changed, something clicked. Some truth that was asleep woke up. And once certain truths wake up, there's no way to make them go back to sleep. There's no way to pretend you don't know what you now know. You're part of an invisible minority. A minority that understands that evolution is expensive, but stagnation is even more expensive. A minority that prefers the pain of discipline to the pain of regret. A minority that knows the price of greatness is paid in advance, in daily installments of conscious discomfort, and now you have a choice to make. You can pretend nothing changed and go back to the life you had before. You can pretend these words didn't touch any wound, didn't light any flame, didn't awaken any possibility. You can go back to the comfort zone and stay there until the comfort zone itself becomes uncomfortable, or you can accept that you're no longer compatible with mediocrity. You can accept that you were made for something greater. Can accept that the pain you feel isn't punishment, it's preparation. Can accept that you're closer than you imagined to becoming who you really can be. The choice is yours. But if you made it this far, if you absorbed every word, if you felt every truth echo within you, you already know which choice you're going to make. Because you're not a person who backs down at the first difficulty. You're not a person who gives up when things get tough. You're a person who transforms pain into power, who transforms pressure into diamond, who transforms resistance into strength. You're a person who understands that on the other side of every fear overcome exists a stronger version of yourself waiting to emerge. I choose to be unshakable. I choose to pay the price of evolution. I choose the pain that builds instead of the pain that destroys. I choose to grow even when growing hurts. Because I understood that the pain I avoid today will be collected with interest tomorrow. And I prefer to pay up front. This is your declaration. This is your identity. This is who you choose to be from now on. Not a victim of circumstances, but an architect of your own destiny. Not someone things happen to, but someone who makes things happen. You choose to be unshakable.